So I'm going to talk a little bit about slow writing. Now, I will admit this. Will Peterson, one of our other presenters, was not able to come this week for some family, so I'm presenting his slides. So please give me a little bit of leeway. So I just want to real quick so who has written slows, or who currently writes slows? So what process do you guys go through? Anybody do it just by themselves? So we use a committee? Who's on the committee? So, okay, so PD, APD, clerkship leadership. Anybody think it's an issue to have your PD, APD on your slow writing committee? Since they're going to be the ones ultimately reviewing and making decisions for match? Yeah, I mean, so we do it too, but almost every year we kind of talk about it, like, is that okay? Like, should we? And then it's like, well, it's probably a stronger letter if you actually have the PD or APD on there. So our standard process is we've got our clerkship leadership. We actually invite some of our residents on there as well, and our med ed fellows. So we have residents who are doing more of an education track as part of their career development, so we invite some of them on there. Our med ed fellows we invite on there as well, with the thought being is that in the future they'll probably be involved in it. Our residents generally have worked with the students more than we have, so we invite them on there. So we do it as a committee as well. So kind of in regards to the SLO, so again, everybody's seen this, so I'll just kind of go quickly over there. There is some revisions coming to the SLO, which I think should be published relatively soon. So SLO is developed to be standardized, concise, discerning, and discriminating. Really trying to keep the comments succinct and relevant, and make every effort to avoid grade inflation and comparison. Because if you look at some of those, it is one of those where everybody gets honors. It does affect how your students go. So again, how do you discriminate between those students? And then how we are going away from some of the ranking of that. So I actually have said it's not published yet, but it will be soon. Kind of what the new SLO is going to look like a little bit. So again, well-written SLO provides overall perspective on what an individual candidate will offer to a training program. So all programs, have different students that they're looking for. Some may want, more research-oriented ones. Some may want more community-oriented ones. So it's going to be a lot of variations in that. So again, you just want to appropriately represent that student and make it so as you're reading that, it's like, hey, this is someone who I want here at this residency. These are the type of students I'm looking for to be my future residents. You want to provide important information regarding distinguishing kind of non-cognitive characteristics. So again, we're all going to get their grades. The new one's going to have some, like, what are their board scores with NVME scores on there. But again, what are the other aspects that don't get captured in grades, in the step scores, that sort of thing. Highlight strengths and explain any areas of focus. Keep in mind that training programs, like I mentioned, kind of vary a little bit. So the SLO is going to have the same very standard, which you've all seen, kind of who you are, who's writing the SLO, who's involved in it, how long have you known the student. Is going to ask kind of in what capacity you know the student, because obviously if it's only from reading through evaluations, it's going to be a little different than actually working clinically with the student. Again, that's some benefit of having the additional people. Then you can have people who actually worked with the individual. And again, the contact, did they rotate in your ED? And obviously with the SLO, it's a clinical rotation. So how well did they do? They're getting rid of the kind of first, second, what number it is, and basically what are your dates? Because again, most of us, especially with visiting students, I don't know how many they've had. I mean, I could put the time into it probably and look into it, but most of us, honestly, don't. Because we've all read SLOs when we're reviewing for residence applications that the part's just blank. So at least putting the dates on there. So if I'm looking at 2 SLOs for a student, I can at least look and see what order they were put into. So at least what the date is on it. And then kind of what's your breakdown of grades? Again, are you a program where everybody gets honors? You have that basically your honors, or you pass, or you're just honors, or do you do some kind of sort of breakdown of your grades? I know we've kind of tried to at my institution have like a 30-30-40. So 30% are getting honors, 30% at high pass, 40% pass, and then there's a whole debate about is that right or not? Are we hurting our students? So that may or may not change come June 1st. But so again, what's that breakdown for the students? And then this part that's going to be new, so actually looking more entrustable. And earlier, Jules had talked about the NCAT, and we discussed that a little bit. So actually trying to mirror a little bit that NCAT, because there are a fair number of programs that are using it. And I don't know, Luann, if you know what the current number is at all? Okay, I mean, so there's a fair number of programs that are using the NCAT. I don't use it, even though I was involved in creating it, I can't use it in my institution. I have to use our institutional one. But trying to mirror the NCAT, so looking at the entrustability, so they fully entrustable, mostly entrustable, pre-entrustable, the areas that we're looking at, and you'll be able to kind of hover over those and get a little more description of what the differences in those areas. But again, perform focused H&P, generate differential, formulate a plan, perform common ED procedures, recognize management basic emergency situations. And then instead of comparing it to the peers, we're actually changing it kind of, how do they compare to to a resident? The kind of your intern when they're coming in, hit the front door. So again, how's their, and it's a 5-point scale from anywhere from minimally acceptable to exceptional. Minimally acceptable to exceptional. So compassion, sensitivity, respect toward patients and team members, receptive to feedback, dependability, responsibility, punctuality, attendance. So again, that professionals that we talked about a little bit about earlier. Timeliness and responsiveness to complete administrative tasks. Again, I don't know how many people are on their competency committee, but I've been on it for the last couple of years for our residency, and this is like one of those areas that's almost the hardest to improve residents that are struggling. Getting your paper, getting your notes done on time, turning all the paperwork, so you're not sending 50 reminders. Adam was one of those. We had to send multiple reminders to him. No. But again, so again, what is their administrative hygiene is another terminology people will talk sometimes about with that. So again, where are they at in that range? Interpersonal communication skills with patients and families, and then again, that how well do they work in the team? And then there is some, in regards to guidance, is still one of those questions we've kind of held over compared to students that matched last year. So they require minimal guidance, standard guidance, moderate and most. And again, there's a little more description. I try to keep it, a little bare bones on here, but again, there'll be some description on there. So again, less of the kind of the bell curve, which we talked about earlier, is never really a bell curve. Everybody's over on that right-hand side, comparing to each other, and more, again, compared to those that are going into it.
Did you say they're going to start, instead of comparing to previous students or their peers, it's going to be compared to the residents? Is that going to be that same case there? Or
so that's for this one, for the guidance, it's going to be compared to your students that went in last year. And again, this is something that we often will describe in our, at the end of it when we have our 250 words to talk about, is when we say someone may need more guidance, there's different reasons they might need more guidance. This is a heavy research student who may need more guidance in getting their project continued. So you need to describe kind of what that means to need more guidance. But yeah, this will be compared to students last year that matched from your institution into emergency medicine. And again, we're still going to have the question about, on the rank, are you one involved in the rank list, and then where might the student fall? And then, so ranking where they are compared to, again, previous students that matched, and then where might they fall on your rank list? Yeah.
Question for just the group. So you kind of mentioned your honors, high pass, 40/40 or 40/30 breakdown. Do you try and do a similar thing with your distribution here, or do you try to have somebody in each category, or how do you personally?
So we do try to break it down, and when I do my advising meetings with students, I actually would say that, we're writing you a letter, so that means you think you're going to be a good student. Now, we do these thirds, and I actually have a slow that I show them and saying, here's what the letter looks like. If I have 9 students going to emergency medicine, I'm going to have 3 of you in each of those categories. Now, again, maybe I have, 1 or 2 in the top third because I have 1 in the top 10, but I will tell them, there will be, a breakdown in each of those categories. Now, if we, last year, we kind of went off a little bit. We were a little higher on the end. So again, that's one of those things that we explain in our letter that, feel this is a very strong group this year and blah, 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 blah. But no, we try to really stick to that top third, middle third, lower third. And like I said, I tell students, you're going to fall into there. And I've told students, we haven't, even they ask, well, where am I going to fall? I'm like, well, we haven't done the meeting yet. So when we do way we do our slows is we do the sticky notes with each one of the students on there. We have what their grade was on the rotation, what their exam scores were, their step scores, and we will put sticky notes with the titles on there, and we will move them around as we rank them. So for that student who was most concerned about it, I said, you fell into the lower third. We still think that you're going to have a great opportunity, but maybe you should think about dual applying. Maybe you should think about that sort of thing. That student stopped talking to me, but that's fine. I think they need to hear it now instead of there's one student in particular. This was a couple years ago who I said that to, and they said thank you, never met with me again until soap day. And they said, well, that's not, you didn't tell me. I'm like, well, I'm still sorry that I'm seeing you here for this, but I try to be very transparent. Most students don't ask me where they fall, but I've had one or two over the years. I ask, hey, where am I? Yeah.
Kind of similar to the question, but a little bit different. Having some of the schools that I affiliated through that high school on that school list, that they ask for some of their either 30 M3s that come through. They're not doing sub-I, but they're asking for slows. And obviously, there's no specific rule that says this, that you can't, but essentially comparing one versus the other doesn't make sense. Is that just my area that people are asking that, or is that
So the way our med school works, our students more or less have 18 months of a fourth year. So I may get them so I've actually had students rotate as early as, I think it was last year, it was like October, and aren't actually graduating until 2023. Now, when I meet with students, I encourage them to have a couple more clinical rotations before they come to us. So at least it's like January or February. So still, 14 months before they're graduating. But yeah, so I've written, or what we have run into, we had one year, we had 3 students who came, said, I'm not doing emergency medicine, so I'm going to take it early, do the rotation, said, wow, I like emergency medicine. So I have written letters for students who are still 18 months in advance. And, we put, again, that's one of those things we put in the letter. They may have only gotten a high pass, but we think with the additional, 18 months of medical school that they will be a great candidate, blah, 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 blah. So again, just kind of describing, how the student may stand out a little bit.
They've still done their core clerkship here.
Yeah, so yeah, ours have all done the core clerkship.
I think the students doing themselves a favor by instead of 3.
Yeah, if it's if ours are all after the core clerkship. They asked us about having our students rotate earlier in, like kind of mixed in with the medicine and neuro. And I try to make the requirement they at least had to have, their medicine, their surgery, like at least half of that clinical rotation. And I was told it's all or none, so I said, okay, it's none. Because if a student shows up the very first clinical rotation in the emergency department, it's going to be a shadowing experience. And students have, when I've asked them or talked to them later on, they just said that I would never want to do this first clinical rotation. So yeah, so if they still are, I think Matt stepped out, but I think they have a rotation that students can take during their M3, but the students who are going into emergency medicine then come back later as an M4 and do it. So I think they're basing their letters off the M4, their sub-I experience. But yeah, so I'd say there's definitely people out there writing letters for an M3 experience. I would just be clear in your description on, they hadn't completed their rotations or wherever else they fell. So again, this kind of goes into the narrative part of it. So any other questions about the general slow? Go ahead.
Well, I have one question, if you don't mind going back. And I think this is a philosophical sort of thing, but when you're talking about how did those students compare on the rotation, that's a very different question than how would you rank them, the sort of, and most of the time we're not actually seeing the entirety of somebody's application before filling out a slow. And so that's going to, historically that also depended on, step 1 and step 2 scores. Now it's predominantly step 2, but it might include their extracurricular activities. And so how do you address the differences between how they perform in the rotation versus to me, the 2B is actually much more inclusive kind of question.
So for us, we actually get all that information from the students. So I actually will ask them, for a CV if they have it, ask them for a personal statement if they've even, drafted it for us to take a look at. So we do try to look at the full package of students. And I mean, a lot of this information, I have an advising form that we use that I've been using for the last several years. So we have all that information on there already. And I tell students, like, this is what's on here, this is what we use it for. So they're all kind of aware of it. So yeah, so we actually do have, for the most part, most of their packet that I know, like, this person has no publications, but they were an EMIG president, and this person has tons of, so I have that information. So that's stuff that I ask them for ahead of time.
So then do you extrapolate where you think they're going to be on the rank list based on their extracurriculars on the side of their performance? Or do you involve the residency leadership team in terms of like actually getting a sense instead?
I generally have a sense, but yeah, so I mean, so that's with our group when we sit down. You know, it's our associate chair for education, it's our PD that's sitting there, you know, with the rest of us as well. So, you know, they have that input too. Yeah.
Is it ever appropriate to have the student, like, one thing I created recently was there's a little form that breaks down some of the elements of the written component, like leadership, compassion, maturity, professionalism, and puts it into a form that a resident or nurse can just like circle and make a very quick like phrase or comment about this student excelled in this specific situation and this is what happened. Is it appropriate to put the onus of filling that out on the student, or because like for me to poll the entirety of the nurses or the residency class about individual student never yields anything. No one ever makes a comment because they're always flooded with all these types of requests and then they just have like alarm fatigue and don't do anything. To give the student a form to fill out by another individual, is that appropriate?
So, I mean, so for us, we actually have a nurse tech shift, and the nurses get sent an evaluation. So they can say, like, when I worked with the student on this shift and provide comment. Now, like, for our regular shifts when students are not working directly with the nurse, we don't, like you said, I mean, we have 400 different nurses, we have 3 different sites, so I don't poll all of them and ask for specifics. For our residents, again, our students for the most part are assigned to work directly with a resident, and then we ask that resident for evaluation of the student, so they have that opportunity to ask specifics. I think some of the, I mean, I think you can go a lot of debate on, you know, if you're having the student kind of hand out cards to the people who they, or talking to who they want to complete the evaluation, or you know, comments on their professionalism. I think that adds in a lot of kind of personal bias to it, and says so there's, you know, other rotations. You know, OB is very specific at our site. They do that, and they say, all right, you got 10 evaluations, you gotta choose 10 people to give it to. The grapevine is very strong, so they know if they give it to Dr. Smith, he's gonna write he's gonna do great comments, and or if I at least go to Dr. Smith and say, hey, I need this evaluation, you know, can I jot down your notes, that they know they're gonna get better comments than, you know, if they go to Dr. whoever. So I think it's kind of, you know, you may get more feedback back if the student knows, or more comments back if the student knows they have to complete X number. But I think you have to look at that and that grain of who are they asking for and kind of the why they're asking for it. Is that what you're at? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to separate the top 10% from the other thirds, and also have, like we were talking, I forget which, I'm not sure, but like the actions speak louder
Yeah.
than words, and like if the student performs an action on ultrasound, we are really blessed in that because it's always like a procedure, and like the student almost always, at least once a lot, finds a critical diagnosis, reports it to the team, and it changes the management. And I love recording those stories and then submitting those stories to, or putting it on slow so that they're looking at these later on and say, oh, you had a great save, you know, that's a fun story, it's very positive, everybody wins. It's just, I'm trying to find those as part of the.
I mean, I guess, yeah. We have not done this. I mean, one of the things, could you, at least ask for, you know, what experience are you most proud of on your rotation? You know, maybe that's something like that would be a way to kind of pull and think about. But again, it's one of those where, I guess my thought, it's still that one perspective where the resident may have been, yeah, after 50 prompts they got it right, but they did get it right. So I don't know. I don't know if there's an easy answer to something like that. I will say, you know, with both the extremes, the really good events and the really poor events, the residents and faculty are not shy to drop me an email and say, hey, this student had this great experience, or, you know, the student really struggled with this, and, you know, hey, you may want to check in on this student for various reasons and stuff like that. All right. So now kind of talking about some of the written comments, and this was kind of brought up previously a little bit by Jules, and talking about just kind of the thinking of the language that we use. So that's one of those, and again, that's another benefit of having a variety of people involved in this, because you know, you get a little more input on what's being said, how it's being said, how it might be read, not necessarily like how you're saying it, but how it's going to be interpreted. You know, when I started doing this, we'd have like, you know, I would write all the letters, and then people would look at them and send comments, and you know, I never wrote enough flowery verbiage in there, and I was too much like, you know, bullet point sort of thing. So, you know, so thinking about, again, that language that we use, so communal terms. So again, more relationship oriented, with focus on being kind, helpful, concerned, sympathetic. So again, often this is more in letters with, you know, for women. So thinking about, you know, are we help, eager, compassion, happy, kind, caring, friend, versus agentic terms, so more achievement oriented, focus on competitive, aggressive. So again, words like strong, skill, you know, lead or leadership, dedication, confidence, active, intelligence, work ethic, hardworking, desire, independent, you know, achieve. So again, you kind of really kind of looking at those words that you're using, making sure that you are using it, and it's not really more based on, you know, gender or race, but looking at, so again, that's why I think having another benefit of like a team approach to it. You know, you've got, you know, 6 different perspectives looking at it. Everybody's going to have their own interpretation on it, and then, you know, ultimately, at least for us, I'm the kind of last person that look at it and, you know, make, you know, accept or decline changes on it. But still having, like I said, you know, 5 or 6 different people's input on it, I think it does make that more well-rounded letter. And again, a little bit, hopefully decreasing some of that bias, because again, you'll notice that even, I mean, I definitely noticed it in our evaluations, you know, on, you know, especially for some specific, and yes, it's usually kind of the older, more established faculty who are doing it, but just the terms that they use, there is a lot of variation. So again, just making sure that you're dedicating a specific time and effort into looking at those terms.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
The people that you are polling and getting involved, they tend to be like faculty that you most pair up with students, or that see students for, or is it people that just all read the same kind of evaluations and decide kind of their feel on those evaluations mean?
You doing for the letter writing? Yeah, so I mean, the letter writing that we have, so it's our, like I said, Associate Chair for Education, it's our PD, it's myself, my 2 assistant clerkship directors, the Med Ed fellows. So yeah, so it's kind of like we sit in a room, we go student by student, pulling up their evaluations. I mean, it's a 3+ hour meeting. And, you know, we will look at an individual student's comments and circle and highlight, and on what areas of strength that we think we should include, you know, that sort of thing. So we're all kind of going through all that data at the same time and looking at it together. Again, this is another way we pull in, like, oh, I did this project with a student and they were really strong in it, so okay, let's add something about this project that they did. And then we have one of our admins has an English major background, so then we give him all the data, and then he puts it into a nice letter, and then we all read through it and say, yeah, this doesn't make sense, and hey, we need to redo it. So again, things to consider: characteristics you're describing an applicant. Are they relative to the job? Are they relative to emergency medicine training? You know, try to avoid, again, Jules kind of brought this up when she had mentioned some of the comments and feedback with Black individuals, but again, avoiding invoking stereotypes. She's not overly emotional, obviously, is very not good terms to use for someone. Pay attention to the balance of agentic communal terms when describing applicants. And again, be mindful, are you describing a personality versus interpersonal skills? Again, which ones are relevant? So again, thinking of it, put in the lens of emergency medicine. And then again, like I said, making sure that you try to have a balanced letter.